This short story is part of the Futures Calling series sponsored by Plextor. Visit facebook.com/Plextor Global to learn more about our SSD products or to listen to other stories in the series. From Dust to Death, written by D.C. Golightly.
You won't believe what we have waiting for you inside, Detective.
Detective Ryan Mulroney smirked at the uniformed officer as he slid under the yellow tape that read, "Police line, do not cross." The younger kids playing cops and fresh out of the academy often thought that every crime scene was obscenely unique. They believed all of the TV shows and the movies they saw. In fact, it was probably why most of them became cops in the first place. He was sure that the rookie loved being there, downtown, in the middle of the night, in a condemned building. Ryan just wanted to be home with a hot cup of coffee. The cold reality, which Ryan had learned over his 32-year career, was that most crime scenes shared commonalities. The average killer wasn't that smart. Many homicides were committed in the heat of the moment, and there was very little time to squash the panic and hide the evidence. However, when Ryan entered the small New York City apartment, he wasn't prepared for what he saw next. The ME was already moving around the body, taking notes on her digital tablet thingy. Ryan wasn't really one for technology, and grabbing 3D scans with her iWhatsits. The cataloging of the body had already begun. Was he really that late? He'd only stopped for one cup of coffee. Ryan rubbed the stubble on his chin and walked over to Marissa, the ME, and tried not to focus too hard on the body she was swirling around. "Ryan," she muttered, not even bothering to look up from the corpse. "Marissa," he replied to be courteous. He was having trouble not looking at the body between them. "What have you got?" "Male, mid-20s. Died from loss of blood." "How much blood? I don't see any of it around here." "All of it," the ME replied while snapping another 3D photo. "Right," Ryan shot back. "Come on, how much blood did this guy lose?" Marissa stood up and finally looked at the older cop. Her glasses had slid down her nose from her being bent over the corpse for the last 20 minutes, and she took the opportunity to straighten both her glasses and her spine. She was pretty, although Ryan looked at her more like a casual observer would rather than an interested beau would. "All of it. Look at the guy, Ryan. He's mummified." The corpse's skin had a dark gray shade to it. It was dry and tight. The man was lying face down on his laptop, which was covered in dust. In fact, the entire room was covered in dust. Ryan hadn't noticed when he first came in, but the room looked fairly undisturbed, as if it had been sitting dormant for years. There were a few spats of blood underneath the victim's head, indicating that his throat had been slit from behind. However, the blood splatter was surprisingly minimal. Ryan swallowed, looked at Marissa, and said, "Is it okay to move him?" She nodded. "I have all the data I need." Ryan grabbed both of the corpse's shoulders and pulled back. The body didn't move. It was as rigid as stone, meaning that the victim had been there for a while. A good long while, from the look of the place. "When was this place condemned?" Ryan asked. 2012, Marissa replied. "Wow, 9 years ago. This guy might have been snoozing in here by himself for the last 9 years?" Ryan tugged again and heard something snap. Some of the corpse's skin had broken away, but Ryan finally managed to pull him to the back of the chair. The face was pinched and flaky. He looked like he was still screaming, even though all of the color had been drained away, and he had obviously been dead for years. A single slash mark lined the front of his neck. At the center of the wound was a round puncture mark that Ryan couldn't place. This was getting seriously creepy. "So where's all of his blood?" Ryan asked, not sure he wanted to know the answer. "My best guess?" Marissa said. "Drained. Look here, at the center of the incision. Something was placed against his throat to catch the blood after his throat was sliced open." "Well, that would account for the lack of blood splatter." "And he's been mummified." Ryan shook his head. "Stop saying that. You sound ridiculous. People don't get mummified in their apartments. Nobody's that sick." "And yet, here we are. I have everything I need. Call the lab when you want your results." Ryan was left alone in the room with the corpse. How had it been preserved so well, even if its blood had been drained completely? It didn't make any sense. He assumed that lots of embalming chemicals were needed for the process. Could the killer have been a mortician? First things first, he needed to gather evidence. The laptop that the victim had been lying face down on seemed like the perfect place to begin. Ryan flipped it open, shocked to see that it was still in sleep mode. The damn thing was still turned on. "Rookie!" Ryan called to the doorway. The young uniformed officer he had seen when he came in poked his head around the corner. "Did you guys turn the electricity back on when you came in?" "Had to, sir. The whole building was converted to automatic operation a few years ago. We had to switch the whole condemned building on just to get inside after the new owners found the body during the X-ray inspection." That made sense. The laptop was still plugged in, so when the building's power had come back on, so had the laptop. It didn't matter that this guy hadn't paid his bill in forever. Once the juice came back on, the thing was chugging along, trying to start back where it had left off. Ryan tapped the power button, bringing it out of sleep mode. Unfortunately, as soon as he did, there was a flicker of light on the screen, and then a wisp of smoke came out of the side. Stupid piece of... Ryan flipped the laptop over and yanked open the casing. He peered inside, poking through the pieces and racking his brain, trying to remember his academy hardware class, seeing as how the majority of crimes were now cyber crimes. "Aha!" he exclaimed. "Jackpot!" Ryan ripped out a small aluminum slab, recognizing it as a Plextor.wmv Pro SSD. The things were practically indestructible, and he was sure that he'd get a read off of it. He nodded to the rookie, muttered some orders about securing the scene, and ran down to the street to get into his rust bucket of a car. He decided against going back to the precinct. His captain was on the warpath again after the recent rounds of corporate-induced layoffs, so he headed for home. He had his department-issued equipment there anyway. He didn't make a habit out of doing his own scut work, but there was something bugging him about the whole case. Maybe it was the eeriness of it all, or maybe he just wanted something to care about again. Either way, he needed to find out what was on the victim's computer. His work desk had gotten a little messy over the last year, but it wasn't his fault that the maid had walked out on him. After brushing off the unfinished paperwork from his police-issued work computer, Ryan plopped down in his squeaky chair and hooked the drive up to the SATA 5 connector. The SSD had a SATA 3 interface, but thanks to backward capability, he was inside the drive and scanning it with his forensic PC utility in seconds. He sifted through a few random files, accessing useless tidbits of the victim's life. He apparently loved some video game called Portal 2 and couldn't get enough online time with something called World of Warcraft, whatever that was. Ryan flipped through the entries and saw that the webcam had actually been on when the computer was last used. "Wow," he muttered. "Was this thing recording when he died?" Ryan accessed the last recorded file, and the video turned on. The screen showed a dark room with a fairly healthy young man looking at the screen. "Are you there?" the man said. "Here," a disembodied voice said. It was whomever the victim was talking to on the other end of the webcam. "Awesome. So, how's Australia treating you?" "Pretty good. Not like New York, though. It's hot. I can't stop sweating." The conversation continued with mundane facts about Australia and how long the flight was, along with other tidbits that Ryan didn't care about. In fact, he was about to shut the webcam off when a shadow crept across the back of the room behind him. The shadow was vaguely human-shaped. It came up from behind the man and reached around him with a sharp instrument of some kind. He dragged the blade across the man's throat, and the bodiless person on the other side of the webcam began screaming. "Whoa," Ryan muttered. The killer slid the knife around the man's neck, but before the blood got much farther down his throat, the killer slipped something over to catch the blood. Ryan squinted, but couldn't figure out exactly what the killer was using. The picture wasn't clear enough. Must be some way to improve this picture. Ryan began fiddling around with the settings in the utility, but accidentally turned on his own webcam. Ryan muttered to himself, but then lost himself in the video settings. He didn't even know there was a shadow creeping up the wall behind him. The shadow was vaguely human-shaped. It came up behind him, and it was holding something in its hand. Visit facebook.com/PlexStoreGlobal to listen to the other stories in the series and to enter Futures Calling contest. Share your prediction for the future of technology for the chance to win your own ultra-fast Plextor SSD.